All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the joint meeting between the West Contra Costa Unified School District Board of Education and the CBOC of West Contra Costa. After our opening procedures, the public will have an opportunity for public comment. If we could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Now for our land acknowledgement, we recognize that we are presently on the lands of the Chochenyo, Muwekma, Karkin, Ohlone peoples and acknowledge them as the first inhabitants of the land we currently occupy. In a minute after roll call, the public will have a chance to make public comment. Public comment opportunities on agenda and non-agenda items in person through the Zoom app and by telephone are allowed. Public comment will last 1 hour. The time allotted for speakers is 2 minutes. If you're attending the meeting in person, you will need to submit a request to address the board form to indicate you desire to speak on the agenda item. If participating via Zoom, you will need to raise your hand by clicking on the appropriate icon in the Zoom app or by pressing *9 if accessing by phone. No yielding of time or substitution of speakers is permitted. Due to the Brown Act, board members cannot discuss items that are not on the agenda and do not usually respond to items presented in public comment. Dr. Hurst, could we please move to roll call?
Thank you, sir. President Gonzalez-Hoy,
Present.
Trustee Smith-Flodes,
Good evening, everyone. Present.
Trustee Phillips, Trustee Reckler,
Reckler present. Can you hear that? Did you hear that?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Trustee Christian,
Good evening, President.
Member John Anderson, and just asking if we could just pass the mic around so we can make sure that we get that recorded for Zoom as well.
Present.
Thank you. Lorraine Humes,
Present.
Jason Lindsay, Gia Ma,
See, she's an attendee and needs to be advanced as a panelist.
and Sally DeWitt. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna move to public comment. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Parliamentarian Tammy is also present. She just reminded me I was skipping agenda review and adoption. So board and our wonderful CBOC members. We have 2 items tonight, one for action and one for discussion. Are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, with no objections, if there are no objections, we're gonna adopt the agenda. Are there any objections? So moved. Okay, adopted. Still learning the lingo, so adopted. Okay, so now we're gonna move to public comment. We're gonna start with people in the room. Do we have public comment tonight?
Yes, we have one public comment, Mr. Don Gosney.
Thank you. And Mr. Gosney, you're welcome to come and stand next to Mr. Freeze so we can see you. Oh, they have a mic over here. Thank you.
Okay. But by the way, the audience can barely understand you or hear you. The audio is so poor here. It's almost like a private meeting with the group here. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, tonight, the 600-pound gorilla in the room is the proposed board policy 7214.2, which provides procedures and protocols for the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. On the ballot for the November 2000 election, Proposition 39 provided for lowering the threshold for passage of bond measures from 2/3 down to 55%. The trade-off was that the issuing body had to create an independent oversight body made up of regular members of the community. The WCCUSD created the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, also known as the CBOC, to look over the collective shoulders of the Board of Education and district staff to ensure that the district was following the law, following the language in the ballot measure, and following the demands of the community that will be paying for these bonds for the next 40 years or longer. The goal was to ensure that the fox wasn't guarding the hen house. As someone who has been a part of the bond program for the past 24 years, having served on the CBOC for 10 years, served as the chair of every subcommittee in the CBOC, and having served as the CBOC chair for 3 years until I termed out, I know something of which I speak. I was the driving force in the previous 3 updatings of the board policy and was the driving force in the 2019 version put before the board. I mention my experience because even though I have vast knowledge and understanding of our bond program, I was told numerous times that my knowledge and experience would not be sought when this version was being drafted. The same was said of Anton Younghair and Tom Panis. Between the 3 of us, we have unparalleled knowledge and experience, and the district slammed the door in the collective faces of more than 50 years of experience. I've desperately tried to discuss the needs of the CBOC with members of the board and the CBOC, but to no avail. I've been known to wear out my welcome, and the message I often get is to just shut up and sit down. What is being proposed here is far too complex and detailed for a 2-minute set of comments. I provided 24 pages for you tonight for your consideration as an alternative to the proposed board policy before you tonight. It's just my opinion, but it's shared by many in that this proposed policy will not serve the best interests of the board, the district, the bond program, and very definitely the public that gets to pay for these bonds. By the way, just to reinforce how much money we're talking about, this is a $2.4 billion bond program. After interest is paid, we're talking about nearly $5 billion. Please do not approve this proposed policy. Sit down with the people that can provide you with the best advice to come up with a policy that will serve all of our needs. My offer still stands. My offer to help still stands.
Thank
The
you, Mr.
version I've sent
Gosney.
you- Point for your consideration.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gosney.
We have no public comment on Zoom.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Gosney, for your comments. Okay, board and CBSC members, we're gonna now move to comments from the board president and the CBOC president or chairperson, Dr. Anderson. And we're gonna start, excuse me, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. That we did have one additional public comment before we move to comments from board and CBOC leadership. Oh, he did. Okay, never mind, everybody. Back to the agenda. So we're gonna now move to comments from Dr. Anderson, and then comments from me before we move to the rest of the agenda. Dr. Anderson, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. The members of the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee are pleased to participate in this joint meeting with you all on the Board of Education. This joint meeting is significant to us as it's focused on a review, is focused on a revised board policy for our committee. This policy is the result of over 1 year of effort of an ad hoc committee composed of CBOC members and district staff. It's our view that it provides for an independent Citizens Bond Oversight Committee and ensures that the district is fully compliant with Proposition 39 and all related statutes. In addition, the other item in this meeting is a discussion of the CBOC membership and outreach recruitment. At this time, the committee has only 5 members and therefore is not compliant with the requirement of the California Education Code that citizen bond oversight committees have seven members as minimum. As a consequence, the committee is not acting on items that require a formal approval or endorsement until we are fully compliant with recruitment requirements of the education code. So it is very important that we get a path forward and everybody working together on recruitment. It's my view that full operations will be restored with the CBOC has sufficient members and an approved revised policy in place. Then we can be confident that the district will have an independent committee that provides oversight for the taxpayers. And that's the point. The CBOC represents the taxpayers of the district. So it's broadly based more than the people that have students and are actively involved in the district. And that that independent oversight for the taxpayers is in full compliance with Proposition 39 and related statutes. And with that, we're pleased to be here to talk to you during your deliberation on this proposed revision to the board policy. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anderson. For my piece, the purpose of this was because I just wanted to acknowledge, I think I speak on behalf of the full board on this. We just wanted to acknowledge your time, the rest of the CBOC's time, because it can be a very thankless job. We just want to say thanks because we know that you spend a lot of time in this important work to hold us accountable. So thank you. And I don't want to take much more time because I do want us to move to the action item, which is really where we're going to spend most of our time tonight. The way that we're going to frame the next two sections for B1, we're going to do presentation from staff. Then we're going to actually have 5 questions from the board and 2-minute comments. Once we move to the action, Dr. Hurst and I did want to frame the action piece and then accept, of course, motions at that point. And then for the discussion item C1, we'll do 3 questions each and then 1-minute comments. And this includes both our CBOC members and our board. So why don't we move to B1, presentation from our staff.
Yes, for the presentation tonight, Ms. Melissa Payne will be doing a presentation on board policy 7214.2 and the work of the subcommittee.
Good evening, everyone. If you'll give me just 1 second to try to make this just a little bit more legible. Well, thank you so much. I'll be looking at the camera and looking around at the table. So I might look all over the place tonight, but it really is a pleasure to be here tonight. Good evening. It is my honor tonight to really present to you the proposed policy from the ad hoc committee. And so we're really excited tonight to share that with the board, superintendent, CBOC staff, and community. So Proposition 39 was approved by the voters, and it allowed and really authorized boards to pursue general obligation bonds at a lower reduced threshold of 55% from 2/3. And with that came the requirement of essentially the formation of a CBOC, which is really taxpayers directly participating in the oversight of the bond expenditures to make sure that they are spent in strict conformity with the law. And so with that, the district voters have approved multiple Proposition 39 school bond measures. We have one of the largest bond programs in the state. Our first bond goes all the way back to 99, but Proposition 39 school bond measures came a little bit later. The district has established the CBOC to actively review and report on bond revenues to ensure that they are spent in conformance with the law. The district's current board policy was last approved December 9th of 2015. So since that last adoption, there have been various sources of recommendations from independent third-party auditors, grand jury report, CBOC, and staff. So in August of 22, an ad hoc committee was formed. 2 staff members, myself and Mr. Freeze, 2 senior CBOC members, Mr. Anderson, CBOC chair, and Miss Sally DeWitt. And really, we had one goal, and that was to really partner together to prepare a policy that would, number 1, align with statute. Number 2, would really incorporate some of the historical recommendations. And then 3, would really celebrate some of the best practices that we have been implementing over the last couple of years in our bond program, with everything that we've learned and everything that we know and everything that we're now doing better. And so ultimately, the purpose of the policy, it being a board policy, number 1, to ensure that we meet all of the legal requirements right off the bat, aligning with statute. Number 2 is really establishing some of the procedures for the form, operation, and appointment. And really, what's fantastic about the Ed Code is it spells it out for us. It's nice when statute not only gives you intent, but kind of very specific instructions. And that's what the Ed Code does in this instance. And then what was really important to the committee was kind of establishing the district's ongoing commitment to supporting the committee and their effective and efficient operations. It's a big task. So some of the features of the policy and some of the things that we're really, really proud of is it directly aligns with statute. And one of the things that came out of the conversations with the CBOC was, let's name the statute. This is a document for every taxpayer. This is a document for our community. Let's call it out. Let's make sure that people know where this is coming from and how this is aligned. It also incorporates considerations from historical recommendations that addresses things like potential conflict of interest. And then lastly is really uniquely crafted for us. And I'd like to really go into a little bit more detail about that. So the ad hoc committee gets together. You have 2 CBOC members, you have 2 staff members, and 17 historical resources. We looked at the existing board policy. We looked at every one of those third-party audit recommendations. We looked at different guidance that was provided from legal counsel. We looked at CBOC resolutions. We really looked at it all because we felt like part of our responsibility was to bring all of the wisdom and the guidance that has been brought forward to the table before we even got started. And so that's what really went into kind of initiating the work. So what were the major considerations? Because I think that's what everybody really wants to know. And I'd like to take just a little bit of time to share this with you. Number 1, CBOC independence. It comes from the statute. And what it speaks to is really the CBOC's purpose and really their legal charge, which is to review the expenditures of the bond program. And so that word independence comes right out of statute, and that was a major consideration. And as a result, you will see in section 4 of the proposed policy, an entire section dedicated to the CBOC's activities and responsibilities. And the number 1 thing that's listed there, you'll see, is that they can establish their own bylaws, which really gives them that independence, as long as it conforms to statute, right? The law and this board policy, which is steeped in statute. So one of the other big considerations was really aligning our board policy with recommendations. And you'll see there's a number of recommendations that have been implemented in this proposed policy from the grand jury, from the forensic accounting investigation. And a lot of them focused on issues of potential conflict of interest and trying to ensure independence without conflict of interest. One of those items in particular was membership reduction. The existing board policy has 17 members. The proposed policy has 11. By statute, there's a requirement of 7. So again, this policy goes beyond what is required by statute, but really acknowledges the comments and the recommendations from the grand jury and from the forensic accounting investigation about a reduced membership size. Another focus of the committee was inclusion. As our CBOC chair shared, this is about all of the taxpayers in our community. And so how do we create a process that feels more inclusive? Part of what we did was we put self-nomination at the top. It doesn't preclude someone from being encouraged from an organization or from someone who's previously served or someone who's familiar. But what it says is if you would like to participate, please let us know. Please let us know, submit your application. Another one of the real considerations was about how do we continue to celebrate some of the partnership that we've built over the years. There's some things that we do here at West Contra Costa that go beyond statute, but we have found them to be best practice. We have found them to be beneficial. We have found them to provide great value. For example, in the proposed policy, as is in the existing policy, there's that extended audit engagement. So by statute, the CBOC receives the audit report in the existing policy, and we kept it in the proposed policy. There's an engagement of that draft report and the opportunity to see it before. One of the things that was important and one of the questions that we got along the way as we've been presenting the proposed policy is, well, where's the red line? Why didn't you just take what you had and make some modifications? Why is it a rewrite? Why is the proposed policy different? And really that came from the ultimate desire to try to make this policy as accessible as possible to our broader community. We thought that by improving the organization of the policy, the existing policy can be a little bit redundant in places. And so we thought by being concise, having particular organization of if you want to know about this, here's where you can find it. If you want to know what statute that comes from, we've named it. We thought that that would really make this board policy more accessible to our broader community. One of the other items that was discussed in great detail has to do with the statute language. So in our existing CBOC policy, straight from statute, it says CBOC member can serve no more than 3 consecutive terms. It comes from statute. It's clearly stated in our existing policy. So the question becomes, what if someone has completed their 3rd consecutive term? Do they have the ability to reapply to be a CBOC member? And part of what we saw in some of the legal guidance that was provided in the past is if the legislature intended for it to be a lifetime ban, they could remove the word consecutive and they could just say serve no more than 3 terms, like you would see with the governor. But what it says is consecutive. So then the question becomes, what is reasonable to no longer be consecutive? And there isn't statute that we can look at. What we've seen is that some of the other districts have used the board policy to make a determination of what was a reasonable, basically leave of the position for it to not be consecutive and therefore be in alignment with statute. And so as is proposed before you, we define the term to be 2 years, which does come from statute. Statute doesn't require that the term is 2 years, but it says no less than 2 years, a term. So we said, so if a term is 2 years, then the time period to sit out for it to not be consecutive would be that same term, 2 years. And so in our existing policy, there is not a pathway for a CBOC member who has completed their 3rd consecutive term to reapply to the CBOC. And in the proposed policy that you see before you tonight, there is that avenue after they have sat out 1 term. There are 2 other items that I think are very critical. One of them is about legal counsel for the CBOC. In the existing policy, what it says is that legal counsel would be available to the CBOC at the discretion of the superintendent. In the proposed policy, it's silent. That language is not included, but that doesn't mean that the opportunity for the CBOC to make the ask doesn't exist. Providing legal counsel to an oversight committee can provide some conflict of interest, and that really comes down to an attorney's professional standards in terms of an undivided loyalty to the client. The board has the authority to execute the agreement with counsel. The board is the client of that attorney. And so there are some inherent conflicts. And so in the proposed policy, it's silent, but that doesn't provide less of an opportunity in our interpretation than what exists in the existing policy. The other item is the joint meetings, like we're having tonight, a great opportunity to sit down and dialogue. In the existing policy, it says shall. In the proposed policy, it says may. One of the things that we think is really critical in our discussions about how to propose a policy that we thought really partnered and met a lot of the considerations and historical recommendations was ensuring that we were providing to you, the board, a policy for consideration that could conform to governance as it adjusted and changed through time. For example, our existing board policy can't actually be implemented as written because our existing board policy calls for an applicant to the CBOC to go to the facility subcommittee, which doesn't meet current governance of the board. So one of the things that we thought was important, and you'll see in different areas of the proposed policy, is that it's really trying to match with what the governance of the board is. And so we called that in multiple places, the joint meeting being one of them. And so the joint meeting is still there. It just says may instead of shall, because ultimately that is up to the board. And so these were some of the major considerations. These are some of the reasons why we feel the proposed policy is so important. So quick kind of roundup of everything that I've shared. We believe that this policy, this proposed policy, has been uniquely crafted for the district, that it aligns with statute, that very importantly, it aligns with current governance, which is something that the existing policy doesn't do at this time, that it implements historical recommendations to allow for independence, but it removes some of the concerns about potential conflict of interest, and that it highlights some of the features and best practices that we do here at West Contra Costa, which includes expedited response to requests for information through a CBOC liaison, enhanced audit engagement, the ability for joint meetings at the discretion of the board, reasonable reappointment after 3 consecutive terms, and what is noted really to be a best practice, and that is to provide the CBOC independence to give them the ability to prepare their own bylaws. Because we don't have a red line, we did prepare a document that is a side-by-side comparison between the existing board policy and the proposed policy. So the proposed policy that you have before you went to an ad hoc committee for about a year. It was presented to the CBOC at 2 Brown Act meetings where we did receive public comment. One of the things that I'm really proud of with this policy was at the meeting as recommendations were made from CBOC members. It was kind of a working meeting and we said, okay, well, if that's what you would like to see, how about we do it like this? So it was collaborative in that way. We came before the board in October with the first reading. And we're here tonight again to bring forward the information and to hopefully answer any questions that you have. And so at this time, staff's recommendation and the ad hoc committee's recommendation is the approval of the proposed policy.
Thank you so much for that presentation. So board and CBOC members, we're not gonna move to questions. As mentioned earlier, we're gonna ask 5 questions each. We're gonna do a round. If there are further questions, we'll entertain them at that point. So we'll start with 5. Who would like to get us started? Oh, I decide, okay. Well, I do know that Trustee Reckler has questions, so why don't we start with Trustee Reckler, if that's okay with her?
Sure. So good evening. Hello to everybody. Thank you to the CBOC, past and present. Thank you to staff. And I will begin. So first with some housekeeping. I always talk to the business office about that. I'll talk to facilities about it as well. Is it possible to put page numbers on the bottom of all of your documents so that when we talk about it, we know collectively as a group and as an audience what page we're referring to? Okay, so that's first. Thank you. The first is if you would talk about the forensic audit and would you call out the top 3 recommendations that the forensic audit made in regard to the CBOC and policies and practices that needed to be implemented?
Absolutely. Give me just 1 second here to make sure that everything that I'm sharing is spot on. So there were 3 recommendations from the forensic accounting investigation, which came from the forensic review, which went back 8 years, and they're found in section 6. The first is that the district and CBOC should evaluate the value, frequency, and type of the proposed monthly reporting. I'm really happy to share that in February of 2020, the CBOC approved a monthly suite of reports that was developed in partnership between staff and the CBOC. So by the CBOC's own approval and by the bond program management plan, which we have and is approved by the board, that has been completed.
I'm sorry to interrupt. May I redirect you just to policy, anything that came up in policy?
Yes. So that was one of the 3. And so the second item was a recommendation to merge 2 statements. And the recommendation from the auditor recommended removing the words "without limit" from the policy. The challenge with the auditor's recommendation was the language that they were striking comes straight from statute. And so the auditor's recommendation to make that change to the language can't change the statute. Well, you can, but not in a policy. You need to match statute. So that is one of the items, and that recommendation was not implemented for that very specific reason. The third item has to do with bond program resources should not be used for the CBOC. So we know that the general fund dollars are used for the support and for the operations of the CBOC. So there was a recommendation to establish a separate viable budget that district officials would charge their time and cost in supporting the CBOC. This recommendation came from the section of the audit where what the auditor said was they found that the activities of the CBOC extended beyond what was provided for statute and would potentially cause a strain on the general fund. We do not have a CBOC budget. What we know is that by statute, we have the responsibility to provide any and all administrative and technical assistance to the CBOC, and that's what we do. As part of the bond program implementation, we are all time carded. We have to assign our time to a resource, and we do assign our time when we are working on the CBOC, but there is not in the overall board adopted budget a separate budget for the CBOC. Those are the three recommendations from the forensic accounting investigation as it relates to the CBOC.
But to policy, and I just want to be clear, the forensic audit, their top recommendations, with the exception of one that conflicts with statute, are their recommendations reflected in this policy?
Yes, one of the recommendation, well, as part of the discussion of the section, it spoke to a reduced membership. And that is reflected in the policy. The reporting that we do is part of our program management plan. It's not in the board policy. And we do not have a budget. But in the policy, you will see multiple times as defined in statute, what funds are used to pay for the operation of the CBOC and staff's time in support of that.
Okay. The next question is, has this policy been reviewed by legal counsel?
Yes, it has. Legal counsel did review, and we have their support. They took no exception.
Next question is, this policy, I imagine, is going to trigger CBOC bylaw changes. I was not able to find any CBOC bylaws. Does a copy of CBOC bylaws exist?
Yes, it does. I would have to check the website to find them. I believe the last time the CBOC bylaws were adopted, it was a number of years ago, but I would have to I would have to confirm the date for you.
How might one? The next question is, and if I get another round, I'm going to come back and really dig into this. But the next question is that your policy states that meetings will happen at least quarterly. What if the committee wanted more?
That's why it says at least. So currently the CBOC meets monthly. And as part of our obligation, responsibility, and really partnership with the CBOC, we provide monthly reports and we do meet with them monthly. So we put that in as a minimum, but it doesn't preclude more than.
Okay, thank you. If there is another round, I would take advantage of it. Thank you.
Yep, we will. Thank you. Trustee Phillips, do you have questions? Thank you. Trustee Christian, do you have questions? Dr. Anderson, do you have questions? Okay, I'm working myself to that side. Clerk Smith Folds.
I do have a couple of questions. One, trustee Reckler, it's not a question, but I found the bylaws. They were last revised on 12/5/2014. Yeah, this is ours. It says West Contra Costa Unified School District Citizens Bond Oversight Committee bylaws. So I went to the CBOC website. I typed in CBOC bylaws and this came up. So I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but I just wanted to navigate you that way. So
Thank you.
We were talking about the reduced size of the CBOC. And you explained to me that currently in our CBOC policy that we have right now, it says 17 members. The minimum that the law says is 7. You guys have landed on 11. Can you tell me why you landed on 11 members? And currently, right now, the CBOC is not in compliance according to President Anderson, because we are at how many members, President Anderson? 5. Okay, and you need 7 to be in legal compliance. So how did you land on 11? Can you walk me through that?
Absolutely. So part of the grand jury report from 2015 identified that when you have a committee that is so large, 17 existing policy, that there are a number of potential issues that can come and inefficiencies. So it recommended a reduced membership. It also recommended removing 2 of the specific positions in the existing policy because of conflict of interest. And so the proposed policy would achieve all 3 of those things outlined in the grand jury report: a reduced membership and removing those 2 positions that they identified as potential conflict of interest. The statute identifies 5 specific category positions and then 2 at-large positions. We knew that it was important to have an odd number. And so understanding that by statute, we were at 7. We talked a little bit about 9. We felt like that might not be enough. And so we went to 11, just understanding kind of the breadth and width and size of our district and our bond program.
So my second question is, in that 11,
Mhm.
there's certain categories, right? That they hit. Can you tell me those categories?
Absolutely, but I'm gonna cheat a little bit and look at my paper because
Absolutely.
I want to be sure to represent everything accurately. So straight from statute, there are 5 very specific designated positions. And so one is a representative of a local business community. The second is a person active in a senior citizens organization. The third is a person active in a bona fide taxpayer organization. One is a parent or guardian of a child who is enrolled in the district. And the 5th kind of compliance position from that specific categorization is a parent or guardian of a child enrolled in the district and active in the PTA organization or school site council. So then there are 2 at-large positions. And as we have drafted in the policy, we've added that in our at-large positions, that we would like those to be based on professional or practical experience, recognition, contributions to the community, diversity of expertise on bond oversight, and representation of the committee from various communities within the district.
So I have 7 so far. So rep of local business, that's 1. Senior citizen, active in a senior citizen, that's 2. Taxpayer organization, that's 3. 4 and 5 are parent and guardian. 1 parent and guardian enrolled, have a kid enrolled. 5 is have a kid enrolled and be active in the PTA or the SSC. 6 and 7 are at large, which you want to have professional experience and be part of the community. The other 4 positions?
So those 7 are statute, the other 4 other at-large. And so
Okay, so
in our
other at-large.
policy, it's
Okay.
just additional at-large positions beyond what is statutorily required.
Okay. So 8, 9, 10, and 11
Mhm.
are additional at-large. And at-large means that they can be anyone in the district, any person. They don't have to be a parent. They don't have to be a guardian. They can be a community member. But what you're looking for is someone that has professional experience within bond programs or within the understanding of the CBOC. Is that accurate?
That is definitely part of what we're looking for. And in the proposed policy, the evaluation of candidates, the recommendation transitioning. So in our existing policy, that review happens at the facility subcommittee, which we no longer have. In the proposed policy, the review of those candidates That recommendation comes directly from the grand jury's report and recommendation on how to evaluate candidates in a transparent and merit-based process for
Okay.
those at-large positions.
President Gonzalez-Floyd, how many am I at? I'm at 3. I have 2 more. Okay, I'm gonna dig a little bit deeper into that and then maybe we can come back around. Those applications, will all applications come directly to the board or will with the policy, the recommended policy? Will all applications come directly to the board because we don't have a facilities committee any longer? Will everybody who applied with their application come directly to us or is there a filter process that happens?
In the proposed policy?
Yes.
In the proposed policy, so anyone can self-nominate through a very simple Google form that we've created. And so when they apply, part of what we ask in the application is, do you qualify for any of these positions? Because we do have some very specific categories. So there's also some people that are prohibited from serving on the CBOC, which also comes directly from statute. So there's just that very simple evaluation. When we receive an application, it's shared with the CBOC chair. So in the proposed policy, there would be a committee that would review when somebody kind of moves from, okay, you've applied and now we see you're eligible, then you become a candidate. So that candidate would go to a committee, 2 CBOC members, 2 board members, 1 staff member to review those candidates, and then they would move from that committee to the board.
Okay, thank you for that. And then the very last question is, you spoke about silence. You said the word silence, like a part of the proposed committee that we have now, and I believe it was around legal, reaching out to legal, right? CBOC having their own ability to reach out to legal. You said that it exists, but it's silent in the current policy. Talk to me a little bit more about what that actually means. And is the discretion only on to the superintendent, or is there a way to appeal? So can you walk me through that process? And that's my final question on this round.
Absolutely. So in the existing policy, the exact language as it relates to legal counsel states, the committee shall not be entitled to legal representation by district legal counselor at district expense unless permitted by the board. So that's your existing policy. And so that is still true if it's not stated in the proposed policy. Now, part of what the proposed policy does really call out is it designates a CBOC liaison. And so part of what we've established that we have found to really be a best practice is we understand that by statute, we need to provide any and all administrative and technical assistance to the committee in the furtherance of their duties, right? So they may need information. They may need some technical assistance. They may need some administrative assistance. And so when a CBOC member has a request for information, a report, a document, they send an email to Mr. Freese's office. He's the CBOC liaison. We track all of those requests and we actually publish the log of all of the requests that are made. And what it shows is not only was that request made, but did it get resolved? Did we provide that administrative and technical assistance to the committee as was requested? So it not only creates kind of this expedited point of contact to make sure that they're getting the assistance it needs, but it holds everyone accountable to see this request was made and was it resolved, because the answer to every question may not come from Mr. Freese's office. And so the log will identify this was sent to this person or that person. And so if there was a desire, even though this is also in the policy, one of the things that legal counsel is provided from time to time is training, right? And that actually comes from the grand jury too, recommendations about providing more training for our committees. And we knew how important that was. We saw it in the grand jury recommendation. So we actually put that very specifically in the proposed policy. But in the event that the committee was seeking those additional, we need to know more about this. We need some guidance. We need some support. They would make that request to the CBOC liaison. And then if that is a request that needs to go to the superintendent and the board, that's how that would move forward. And that's how the committee and really anyone, because everything we do as Brown Act, would be able to see really how that continued to move forward.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Dr. Hurst did point out that we did have one additional public comment that we did not call on. So before I ask my questions, why don't we allow Mr. Anton Younger, I apologize for saying your last name wrong, to make public comment. It'll be 2 minutes, so we can put up the clock.
Mr. Anton Younger, can you unmute yourself?
I believe I did.
Yes, you did.
Anton Young here. I'm a former CBOC member for 10 years. On March 3rd, 2022, the $575 million Measure R bond measure was approved by 35,972 voters. This measure said, quote, all bond expenditures will be monitored by an independent Citizens Bond Oversight Committee to ensure that funds are spent as promised and specified, close quote. The district has broken that promise to the voters. The district does not have a functioning CBOC. The CBOC has only 6 members of the minimum legally required 7 members. The CBOC has only 6 of the school board required 7 members. The board policy on tonight's agenda for approval will not provide for an independent CBOC. The staff report implies that the CBOC recommended this policy at their September 12th, 2022 meeting. The CBOC has not recommended this policy. When the CBOC reviewed this policy on September 12th, only 3 CBOC members attended that meeting. Your 2 new CBOC members, one appointed last week, have never reviewed this proposed policy as a CBOC member. I request that this matter be referred to a board workshop to hear the CBOC members and voters. It's the end of my statement.
Thank you. Before I move to my questions, Ms. Humes, do you have any questions for staff? And you're muted. I'm sorry. You just have to unmute.
I'm sorry. Was mentioned that one of the resources was for guidance was legal guidance, and you had talked somewhat about providing legal counsel to the CBOC. Has there ever been legal counsel that was not the school board's legal counsel to the CBOC? Unmute.
Thank you. The board did enter into a contract with Mr. Adam Ferber, who did provide some legal guidance to the CBOC. His invoices were paid by the district, and that was all under the existing policy. He has since retired.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And another question is that one of your resources was the grand jury. And in that report, it mentioned one of the problems was not getting financial reports. Since you're the facilities department's fiscal coordinator moved to the business department in 2022, you did not have any financial reports given to the CBOC until October. I didn't see any mention about a fiscal coordinator in the policy, but you did say you would have reports. Is this considered in the policy to give us back our monthly reports?
So there was a delay in providing the monthly reports when the fiscal coordinator did move over to the business office. That position still has not been filled, but those reports are being provided. Currently on the district website, all of the monthly financial reports are available through 10/31/22. Those were presented at the last CBOC meeting. And at our next regularly scheduled CBOC meeting, we will have the financial reports for both November and December. And so there was a delay in providing the reports, but those reports have been provided, albeit a little bit of a delay. So when we had someone that was doing it, we were receiving the reports the very next month. Now it's essentially a 1 month delay. But yes, we are committed to providing the monthly financial reports. I think that's really the lifeline of being able to understand how the bond expenditures are being made, and to really see where every penny goes, which I think is critical to the CBOC. And on our website now, we have through 10/31/22.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Humes. Okay, I have 3 questions, and then we'll do a second round of questions for those that have left. I wanted to get a more understanding about this piece about legal counsel, which seems to be a contentious issue, right? So as I heard you answer Clerk Smith-Folds, seems like if the CBOC has a question for legal counsel or need legal support, they make the request to the liaison, which is Mr. Freeze. And then Mr. Freeze makes the decision of whether or not to send it to legal counsel. Is that correct?
So I don't know exactly how that was done previously. I know what the policy said. Maybe I will pass the mic on that one.
To your point, if they make a request for legal counsel, we'll try to understand what the request is so we know how to direct that. That would be something that we refer to the superintendent's office to make the final decision if they were to get legal counsel and how that would represent for them.
Got it. Okay, thank you. So then if the CBOC, let's say Chairperson Anderson, was not happy with the response, right? At that point, would they have a chance to appeal to the board for that support for legal counsel? Since it's a legal counsel of the board, would they have that ability under this new policy?
So absolutely. I mean, I think that some of the things that are important, the CBOC has a very important responsibility. And I think that was really acknowledged by the legislature, and you actually find that in the statute. I think they also understood the inherent conflict of interest, right? If there's legal counsel, their client is the board. And so ultimately, that is where that undivided loyalty lies. Only the board has the authority and the ability to enter into that contract. The CBOC doesn't have the authority through the district to enter into a contract, right? That just belongs to the board. And I think the legislature understood kind of some of those inherent conflicts. And there's actually statute that takes very seriously any concern about fraud or waste or abuse, because I think it acknowledges and it understands that if there's a concern, there's a way that that can be brought forward. When it comes to legal counsel for things like guidance and education, training and things of that nature, I think that falls a little bit more in the administrative or technical arm. Like we might have an expert like an architect, a contractor, we might have an attorney provide Brown Act training, right? And so I hope that answers your question. If not, please let me know. I want to be as responsive as I can, but it's a complicated issue.
Yeah, thank you. You did answer my question. So my third question is around what you said in your presentation around compliance. So what I heard you say is that currently, because we don't have an up-to-date policy, we are out of compliance with state statute. Is that correct?
So by statute, the board appoints the members of the CBOC, and in the existing board policy, that pathway to get from applying to the board for consideration, it's broken because the policy very clearly defines that governance going through the facilities subcommittee, which we haven't had in some time. And because we've known that this has kind of been an issue, one of the things that we took into consideration in proposing a policy for the board's consideration was trying to make sure that this policy could be longstanding and would be able to meet governance as it potentially makes some of those minor changes in time. But absolutely, the existing board policy as written cannot be implemented within the current governance of the district.
Thank you for that. Okay, let's go for our second round. I believe there's only 2 members who have additional questions. So I always start Trustee Reckler, and then we'll go to Clerk Smith-Folds. We'll do 5 again, and then we'll do a check-in on where we are with questions at that point.
Great, thank you. So I'd like to move to page 3. To the top of the page, 4222, and then 4232. And here, this is really a question about wording. And so both of these start out with the district will provide the committee with the district's formal written management response to all findings, recommendations and concerns addressed in the performance audit within 3 months of receiving the audits as required by Ed Code 15280, subsection A2. But when you actually do go to that statute, it says that the governing board of the district shall provide the Citizens Oversight Committee with the responses. So might you please be able to explain why this says district and the statute says governing board? I see these as 2 distinct separate bodies.
So that's an excellent point. And so the statute does say that the board will provide a response to any and all findings, recommendations, and concerns from the audit. I think in writing district, I definitely see your point that if we're aligning directly with statute, we would say board, and providing district. I guess I was just thinking that typically the audit comes to the board for receipt. And so the minutes of the board meeting are written by staff. That's how that information is communicated. If there are responses from the board, typically that's captured in the meeting minutes from the meeting. So I agree that the statute does say the board will provide responses to those things. And so if that's a recommended change, absolutely, that does align with what the statute says.
Okay, thank you. And if we decide to leave it as district, then the board needs to be looped into that at some point, because I don't believe I've ever gotten any responses. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think I've ever gotten anything back from anyone on any CBOC comments. So, so that is a definite, I have a check next to that for sure. Okay, I want to move on to page 4, which is committee membership. And I'd like to know why a residency or work requirement was eliminated.
So respectfully, I don't believe that it was. So the positions that exist in the proposed policy, the 5 compliance positions are named by statute. Of those 5, 2 of them could be argued to not be local. That would be the person active in the senior citizen organization and the person active in the bona fide taxpayers organization. In the proposed policy, it's the language from statute. In the existing policy, it actually goes on to more specifically say, for those 2 positions, it says 1 member shall, at time of appointment, be active in a senior citizen organization, which may be a local, regional, statewide, or national organization. So there isn't actually that local requirement for those 2 statutory positions. And I think it's important in a policy that it reflect the statute. So for just the exception of those 2 positions, every other position does have that local requirement. And so for the 2 that doesn't, or excuse me, for the 2 that do not, that language is from statute.
Could you though?
I'm sorry?
Could a local requirement be enacted?
I think it would be best to get that confirmed, but my concern would be that by statute, it identifies these very specific categories of those positions. So I believe it could be challenged if the policy went beyond and provided further restriction than what the statute identifies. But I'm clearly not an attorney. But that would be the concern. And in the existing policy and in this proposed policy, for those 2 particular positions, that local requirement is not there.
Okay, I'd like to move on to the top of page 5. And it has to do with committee members not being able to be removed except for cause, which means illegal activity or violation of district or state regulations. What might happen if 4 members just stop showing up? What would happen to the committee? They can't be removed. You won't meet quorum.
So one of the things that I think is really important is, like many of the committees of our district, they're volunteers. They're signing up for a job really in the service of the community. And so if somebody is no longer able to serve or is not able to attend a meeting, I mean, that could happen to anyone. Is that what you were asking, if 4 people didn't attend the meeting or withdrew from the committee?
If 4 people, let's suppose your committee is at 7, 4 people just vanish off the face of the earth and stop showing up. They can't be removed according to this language. And now you have 3 members on your committee who are never able to pass anything because you have phantom membership.
So I think
I should preface this by saying that I'm talking without seeing their bylaws, and it did not occur to me to use the search function because search function never works. So I pulled down all the tabs and there was nothing there. So.
well, and I think from a policy standpoint, right? What's important is that we ensure that there isn't conflict of interest and that there isn't anything nefarious, right? But absolutely, from a bylaw standpoint, and attendance policy, et cetera, is something that the CBOC could consider. But from a policy standpoint, it's really focused more on conflict of interest and more severe concerns of removing someone from the committee.
Okay. I'd also like to understand the board's role in recruitment. Before I got on the board, I worked really hard to try and find people for this committee, and I had like zero success after really talking to parent groups and stuff like that. I stopped when I became a board member because I perceived conflicts of interest or potential conflicts of interest. So might you discuss how board members might be able to help the committee in recruiting? And we also might want to save this for the other one if you'd like me to.
I think it's an important point. It definitely belongs in both. I think that the concerned conflict of interest that was identified in the grand jury report was about board members appointing someone to the committee as their representative, which is not something that's happening now. In the proposed policy, when somebody self-nominates and they would move forward as a candidate, it would go to the selection committee and then it would come to the board. So it would be at the approval of the board that they would be appointed to the committee. I think that it would be wonderful to have advocates and people in the community, as all of our trustees are, encouraging people to continue to find ways to bring their skills and to serve the district. And it comes in so many different forms. We have an amazing community, really dedicated to service and dedicated to the district in so many ways. And I think sometimes people have to find the right match for their skill set and their comfort and how to serve. And I think the CBOC is one of those really important ways that members can. And so please, everyone, anyone watching, anybody here, there's incredible important work that we're doing, and everyone is welcome to come, not just as a CBOC member, but to the meeting to learn more. So it would be amazing to have the trustees sharing the CBOC as one of the opportunities and ways that I think community members can really continue to serve and support the district.
Yep. That was good. That was 5.
If there's another opportunity.
Okay, we'll check in about time after Clerk Smith Falls. Absolutely. Clerk Smith Falls, it's your turn.
Thank you so very much. So I do have a question about the policy, the recommended policy that you guys are bringing for recommendation, and the bylaws that the CBOC has. So in the CBOC bylaws, section 7 has meeting schedule on it. And it says, and I'm reading verbatim, after the board has set their regular yearly meeting schedule, the committee shall determine the meeting schedule of the CBOC as to not to conflict with the meeting of the board. We're all in agreement. The committee shall also meet on such other dates as directed by the committee. The committee chairperson or the board, the committee shall meet at least quarterly. That's where you got quarterly from, right? Because it says at least quarterly. And the committee members shall be available to attend board meetings when performance and financial audits are presented. The very last sentence is, the committee and the board shall hold joint meetings during the first quarter, January through March, and the third quarter, July through September of each year. Your current policy that you're bringing forward, it doesn't have that, right? The joint meetings are not a requirement, or they are a requirement?
So in section 7.1.4 of the proposed policy, the language reads, the committee and board may hold joint meetings during the first quarter, January through March, and third quarter, July through September of each year. The word was changed from shall to may, because ultimately this is the board's policy. And so the board has the ability to schedule the joint meetings, but it is not a requirement as it is in the existing policy where it says shall.
Okay, so now I have a question for the parliamentarian. Madam Parliamentarian, can you please tell me the difference between shall and may legally? Which one trumps the other?
So which one trumps the other is kind of a weird way to look at it. May means you can do it or not do it. Shall and must means get it done.
Okay,
So-
thank you for that. So my third kind of follow-up to that is in the bylaw, it says, get it done. In the proposed policy, it says, if you want to. So my question is, why if you want to versus get it done? Can you explain to me why you guys decided if you want to versus get it done?
So what we're proposing is the board's policy. And so if the board would like the word to be shall versus may, absolutely at the discretion of the board. The CBOC bylaws are really a way to help create independence for the CBOC as the oversight group reporting to the taxpayer. And so as is written in the proposed policy and in our existing policy, the CBOC can establish their bylaws as long as they're in conformance with the law and then this policy. So the CBOC bylaws as they are say shall. It's our intent to do this. It's to the board's discretion if they would like that word to be shall or may. And so
I'm sorry to interrupt, but part of the discussion that we had at the committee on that item really was about the CBOC dictating to the board when they met and should not meet. And so part of that was why we changed the word to may instead of shall. So leave that up to the board as part of their policy to determine when they would meet with the CBOC within the time frame that we've outlined.
Okay, I'm gonna have to marinate on that answer for a minute, Mr. Freeze, and then we may have to go back around, but I think I have one more, two more. Okay. I want to talk about going from monthly meetings to not monthly meetings. Give me a little bit of an understanding on why in the proposed policy, you're going from monthly meetings to not having to have monthly meetings. Did I understand that correctly with the CBOC?
So part of the intent of the policy was to propose something for the board's consideration that could support the governance. So what we said was for a program as large as we have, we should meet at least quarterly, but there is no intention to stop meeting monthly. So the policy is setting a minimum, not identifying what the desire is of the committee. So we currently meet monthly and we plan to continue to meet monthly, which would be in compliance with this as it's drafted. But the idea was from a policy standpoint, really kind of understanding that meeting less than quarterly might not provide enough information to really complete all of the committee's duties. And so we said, let's set a minimum, but we don't have to set a maximum. There have been months that we've had more than one meeting. And so ultimately what the statute says is that we're providing the administrative and technical assistance. And so if the CBOC would like to meet and we're going to meet monthly, we're going to be there. We're going to provide our monthly project reports and our financial reports. If they want to meet more than that, and there's assistance that we can provide in the form of agendas, postings, meeting minutes, et cetera, we're going to provide that support so that they can really meet their legal charge of the committee. And so policy setting a minimum based on what we think the minimum would have to be. But it's not saying that that means that we're no longer going to meet monthly.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is, and this is my last question, for this round, hopefully, but what I'm hearing is the CBOC has the right to say, staff, district staff, we're going to meet August, September, October, November, December. And district staff will say, great, we're going to be there to support August, September, October, November, December.
Mhm.
The policy that you're saying is you have at least to, teacher voice. Oh, wait, there it is. You have to at least meet quarterly, once a quarter. But the CBOC has the independence to
Mhm.
say, we want to meet every month for 12 months, and the district will say, we will support that because that's our charge.
Absolutely. And
Okay.
there have been times, different subcommittees of the CBOC were meeting for annual report and other things. And that's the support that we're going to provide because that's what they need to meet the duties of the committee.
President Gonzalez Hoy, I'm complete with my 5.
Thank you, Clerk Smith Foltz. Okay, so what we're gonna do, because I want to be thoughtful of time, still have comments on top of it, right? We're gonna do one more question for Trustee Reckler and one more question for Clerk Smith Foltz. So you both pick your favorite that you have left. And then we're gonna move to a recommendation that Dr. Hurst and I have for process, and then comments and motions, okay? Trustee Reckler, pass to you.
So on page 6, under meetings, I want to come to 6.2, where we talk about the committee selecting a chair and a vice chair and a secretary, and then choosing parliamentary procedure, choosing Robert's Rules of Order. And I'm wondering how that happened, because I'm reading this very differently, where you guys are actually dipping into bylaw business instead of policy business. And I'll explain that after, but if you could just give me your thoughts on that.
So the idea here was to basically say, from a policy standpoint, the CBOC needs a chair, a vice chair, or a secretary with flexibility. And that, majority vote, and then defining Robert's rules. If the CBOC wanted to have additional officers, if they wanted to ultimately have a change to something like that, I see when it comes to like Robert's rules, right? If they wanted to do Robert's rules or Rosenberg's rules, I think the intent was just to kind of set a minimum for the leadership and the organization of the CBOC. But I do agree that there are sections of this that do dip into the bylaws, and I agree that the CBOC should have the ability to say, we want to run our meetings somewhat, with Rosenberg's, et cetera, in bylaws. So if the recommendation is to take some of the language out of that section that could belong in bylaws, that would be fine. I mean, I think the intent was just to kind of identify the loose organization.
So I'm going to make a mini comment here, but just to stress this. So in my opinion, the board policy mandates that they use a recognized parliamentary procedure. The bylaw allows them to pick what they want to use. So by us telling them to use Roberts, I don't feel that's right. If there are positions that must be had by statute, so I understand that minutes must be kept, is my understanding from reading the statute. Maybe that's said there, that there's a position that must take minutes, but we don't tell them what to have as their officers if it's not, to me, it feels like we're dipping into their business.
I agree. I think for compliance with the proposed policy, the critical position would be the CBOC chair, because that specific position is part of the leadership communication between the CBOC. For example, when somebody applies, so the CBOC chair is named in the proposed policy to receive a copy of that application as soon as it's received by staff. But that would be the only position of the CBOC that exists in the proposed policy, I think, would be the CBOC chair. And I agree that as a Brown Act committee, I do think parliamentarian procedures are important, but I agree that the determination of which one belongs in the bylaw.
Thank you. Okay, Clerk Smith, your last question.
Thank you so much, President Gonzalez Hoy. My last question has to do with this idea of a reasonable amount of time between being on the CBOC. So you went through it and I tried to take notes about what you were saying about what is a reasonable time. Their bylaws say this, and just tell me if this aligns with what you guys were saying. After appointment to a 2-year term, committee members who wish to be appointed for a second 2-year term shall reapply to the board for consideration. Committee members shall receive no remuneration for participation on the committee. So is this aligned with what you guys are proposing, or am I looking at two different parts?
So what's interesting is they call out a 2-year, a second consecutive term. Is that what I heard you say?
After appointment to a 2-year term, committee members who wish to be appointed for a second 2-year term shall apply to the board for consideration.
So currently, the term is defined as 2 years. In statute, it defines that the term must be a minimum of 2 years. And so in existing and proposed policy, a term is 2 years. The limitation that exists in the statute is 3 consecutive 2-year terms. And so in the proposed policy, if somebody wants to apply to serve for their second consecutive 2-year term, third consecutive 2-year term, that's spelled out, and it's basically the same process. We were trying to keep it as simple as possible. The limitation is the 3 consecutive. And so what I was speaking to that we were really trying to address is what happens when somebody serves their 3rd consecutive term, and by statute, it says they can serve no more than 3 consecutive terms. So it was about the word consecutive, and how do you define a reasonable period of time between the completion of the 3rd consecutive term and reapplying to kind of start all over again?
And you guys determined that that means you take a 2-year break.
So what we did to keep it simple was we said if we define a term as 2 years, then we would say that you would sit out 1 term, which would be 2 years. And that's just what was recommended here to keep it simple.
Okay, thank you. President Gonzalez Hoy, I am complete.
Thank you so much. Okay. For this next section, I know that a lot of you have a lot of comments. So Dr. Hurst and I wanted to provide some context on kind of the recommendation on the floor. So one of the challenges that we heard tonight is that we are out of compliance with stature, right? So we have to have an updated policy. But we also heard, as we heard tonight from some of the questions, some of the language needs to be changed. So the recommendation that we wanted to propose is that we pass the new policy tonight, but then that we also refer it to the new bylaws committee that we're forming as of hopefully next board meeting to be able to review the policy and continue to gather input from community on changes that need to happen. So it would be both passing it, but also referring it for further review. And then at that point, we can make changes that need to be made, like the ones that were brought up tonight, and the ones that were brought up by community members in the future. So that's kind of where we were. Dr. Hurst, anything you wanted to add to that? Okay, wonderful. Now, of course, if the majority of the board thinks there's a better way, happy to, of course, hear it. But we're gonna move to comments and motions. So if anyone would like to have, okay, motion first. Is there a motion on the floor first, and then we'll head to comments.
President Gonzalez Hoy,
Go ahead.
I move that we accept the recommendation of staff with the understanding that we're moving it to a committee. No, that's not how I said it.
If we could reword your motion, so it's so your motion should be, if I may, that you move that we approve the policy and refer it to the bylaws committee for further review.
Absolutely. I motion that we approve the policy and refer it to the bylaws committee. For further review.
Reckler will second that.
Thank you. Is there another motion on the floor? Okay, so why don't we move to comments? We'll start with Clerk Smith Folds. Since you made the motion, we'll move to Trustee Reckler, then Trustee Phillips, Trustee Christian, and then I'll open it up for any comments from Chairperson Anderson. Go ahead, Clerk Smith Folds.
Thank you so much for the work. It was a lot of work that you put into it. I appreciate it. I do enjoy going to CBOC meetings, so I would like them to continue to be monthly. I think that it's imperative that this board comes into compliance. We have to start being in compliance with everything we do, and one of the compliance measures is to have a policy. One of the things that I want to make sure that we don't give up is our authority over that policy. It is a board policy. So the board needs to be involved. And one way the board is involved is by bringing it to our committee to look at, and then having that committee bring back recommendations. But I think it's imperative that we come into compliance. So that is the reason why I will be voting yes on the policy tonight, with the understanding that we then take that to a board committee and the board comes back with the language that the board believes is the best for this policy. President Gonzalez-Hoy, I am complete. Thank you for your work. Thank you, CBOC, for your work. And thank you to the community for being so invested in making sure that we have the best working policy.
Thank you, Clerk Smith Folds. Trustee Reckler, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. One reminder to you, President Gonzalez-Hoy, is you will now have to appoint people to sit on a committee to review applications. So that'll have to happen ASAP. So these comments, they're simultaneously going to be a little sharp and a little diffuse. I may throw some darts because I've been sitting on a few things for a really long time. And so I apologize in advance. First, I want to thank the CBOC, past and present, for their work. There are people in this community that have served for years, and they are uniquely vested in the committee and its proceedings. I really appreciate that. Overall, they've made us better. There's been a lot of pain as well. I think some of it was really unnecessary, but they have gifted us with their time and their knowledge and overall better practices. For staff, I really appreciate you because I know you work really hard. And I think at times you've been under unbearable scrutiny on practices and procedures, and some of it has been warranted and some of it has not been warranted. For the board, we also need to do a better job on providing oversight. There were several times where Trustee Folds and I motioned together that there need to be 2 meetings of this committee per year. We are in debt to the taxpayers of this community for $2.4 billion, and those meetings have not happened on a regular basis. And I am not okay with that. I am absolutely not okay with that. And I want to say that publicly. We can absolutely do better. We have been through a tough time. This committee is not easy to recruit for, but staff has to do a better job of recruiting for this committee. We cannot be out of compliance, and it has to be a mix of people who want to learn and people who have experience. So the fact that the CBOC wanted to suspend operations because they didn't have enough people, that is not okay. So this is a start. I think there's a lot of good things in this policy. But there's work that needs to be done, and I'm committed to doing it. And I don't want the board to just pass this and push it to the side because that's not the right thing to do. And so I am really counting on this coming back in a working group, and I just want to be heard. So what happened with this for me is that the board didn't do anything wrong, but it was scheduled for October 5th. When I was absent, you were absent. And so I never was heard on this policy. And I'm not okay with that either. And I just want to be heard. If somebody says, Reckler, your ideas are horrible, at least I've presented them. But I didn't get a chance to ask them or get them answered, which is why, I got into the details tonight. So that's it. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trustee Reckler. Trustee Phillips, do you have comments? Thank you. Trustee Christian, do you have comments?
Oh, okay. Thank you. I just wanted to thank the CBOC committee and those who are working on it, we just got to stay on target and stay focused and just make it happen and be in compliance. So, so we got a lot to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Christian. Chairperson, Dr. Anderson, do you have any comments?
Well, I concur with your. Okay, I think we're okay. I concur with the motion that you're acting on at this point in time, and I'm pleased that the suggestion of approving and then referring it to your bylaws committee for final oversight.
Thank you very much. Dr. Hurst, do you have any comments before we move on? Okay. My comments, I just want to thank Chairperson Anderson, the CBOC, for their work on this, our staff, for all the work, and our community for their input. I do think that this way we can move forward. We can continue to incorporate, input from the community that were here and continue to send us. I do think it's important to me that we're in compliance, especially because we have gotten into trouble in the past. So it is important for me to do that. And then I agree with a lot of things that my colleagues said. We do have to do a better job at looking for people. I do want to recognize, though, that I do see it in the newsletters. I do see it in communications quite often. And just people are just not stepping into the positions, right? So we have to do maybe things differently. Now that we know that we can be involved as a board, maybe we have also space as a board to look for people that we know to serve in this very important committee. So I just want to thank everybody for their work. So why don't we now move to a vote? Oh, excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot a very important person. Ms. Humes, do you have also comments?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna now move to the vote. For the vote, it's only the Board of Education. So we'll start with Clerk Smith-Folds,
Smith-Folds, yes.
Trustee Reckler,
Reckler, yes.
Trustee Phillips, Trustee Christian,
Yes.
and myself is a yes. So it passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so we can move now to item C1 and pass it to Mr. Freeze.
All right, tonight we just wanted to give an update on recruitment and what we've been doing to help bring new members on. A lot of this has already been discussed this evening in various other conversations about what our current makeup is. Let's see here. So our current makeup, we have 5 members currently, 4 that are in the statutory positions. Ms. Ma just joined us and was appointed to the last board meeting. We did have resignation in between the last board meeting. Our most recently previous appointed member had resigned, just felt it wasn't the right committee for her and that she would look elsewhere in the district for other committees where she could participate and have more input. But as it stands right now, we have Ms. Ma that could move up into the parent or guardian position, which would give us 4 of the statutory required positions. Mr. Lindsay could move up into one of the at-large positions. And we do have 1 application that's currently in the queue that we will be forwarding on once you have the committee, once we know which board members would be appointed to the selection committee. Page down. For some reason, it just wanted to advance. So some of our recruitment efforts, we've been advertising on the district's website itself. Our communications office has actually been really helpful, and I think that's really the source we've received some of our most recent committee members that have applied for the positions. That's not on this list. I actually contacted Ms. Sanders today, and she corrected me that she actually has been putting this out on social media. She's been putting it out on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. She did say that there are other opportunities out there. We could do more advertisements, such as in DMV, where we do rotating assignments. I think that we've talked about this evening, the role that the board may play and how we look at selecting members and how encouraging folks without appointing them to the committee could be helpful. So we would appreciate an input. And tonight, I think we just really want to let you know where we were, what we've been doing. We know we haven't been successful as we need to be, but it is a community effort. Not only the district has to push for this, I think our board needs to help us, as well as our CBOC committee and the outreach that needs to be done at that level as well. If there's any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Freeze. Questions board. We'll start with Clerk Smith-Folds. Just a reminder, we're doing 3 questions this round, all around.
Mr. Freeze, the first slide that you had, the first slide that we looked at, it had 17 positions listed, right? We are now in this policy moving to 11. In the slide, though, you had specific areas, Hercules resident, El Cerrito resident, 2 Richmond residents, I believe on the slide. Is that going to stay? Is that what you're looking, is that the goal? Is that what you're looking for? Tell me what's happening with that. That's my first question.
You want to take that?
So in the recently adopted proposed policy, after the 5 compliance positions that are very specifically categorized, it is at large for the remaining 6. And so it is not by area.
Second question, is it your intent to create equity on the board by making sure or hoping to make sure that all 6 of the rest of the at large is not from one area? Is that your intention, to make sure that it's spread out across the district?
I think absolutely.
Okay.
I think that's always the intention. And one of the things that we did in the proposed policy was really tried to broaden it and make it a little bit more inclusive, and that the application wouldn't necessarily be so overwhelming. One of the things I think would be amazing is we'd like to encourage people to come to a CBOC meeting. They could check it out on YouTube. They could talk to existing CBOC members, past CBOC members, anybody they'd like to learn more. We have often seen great participation from communities whose schools are actively in the planning or construction process. And so a lot of times you'll see more interest, sometimes from a particular community, if their school, for example, is being rebuilt. And so, but I think the intention, and as is stated in the policy, is that we are looking for that inclusive diversity in a merit and transparent process that we're really excited will now go through the selection committee as recommended by the grand jury.
And thank you for that. And my third question is, Mr. Freeze, with your intention of diversity, have you reached out to particular cities' mode of communication? For example, Hercules has the patch, right? Hercules has residents of Hercules, which is our local way of communicating with each other. Richmond has the Richmond Standard. Richmond has other ways. Because you want diversity and intentionality behind spreading the CBOC across the district, what has the recruitment look like to particular areas? Is that a clear question?
I think so. And so if the question, we have not asked, there have been questions coming from some cities like Pinole. Do you want us to help recruit or appoint a member because they're falling underneath the old policy that was in place? And there is hesitation about having a city appoint or recommend a member. So I think with the clarity tonight, I think we can go to our cities and get the input. We do, when we do presentations to the cities, we do bring that up in our presentations that we are recruiting and looking for membership. And then we'd be looking for memberships from those areas.
Thank you so much. President Gonzalez-Hoy, I just have a comment if it's allowed. Thank you.
Yeah, we're gonna do comments after questions, absolutely. Trustee Reckler, do you have questions?
No, just comment.
Thank you. Trustee Phillips, do you have any questions? Thank you. Trustee Christian, do you have any questions? Wonderful. Thank you. My question was asked by Trustee Clerk Smith-Foltz. So, Ms. Humes, do you have any questions?
Can I ask a question to Superintendent Hurst?
Sure.
Okay. Superintendent Hurst, do you belong to any, this is not a common, we are not unique in having trouble getting CBOC members. And especially if you have several measures, so it's over a long period of time. Do you belong to like a superintendent's committees or something so that you could ask them how they would go about this?
Yes, we meet monthly as the superintendent group for Contra Costa County. But I also am in contact with Lynn Mackey, our county superintendent, on a regular basis. This is something that I could pose to her and she could put it out to the superintendent group as well.
Mhm. It seems like it's a bigger problem than just our district. So I think it'd be good to be addressed further. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm. And I have another question is, in our the last Moss Adams performance evaluation, it was a Proposition 39 audit and in addition of a transparency audit where there were 20 areas that the board had asked them to look into. One of them was the website for the CBOC. And in that proficiency, in that audit, it was suggested by Moss Adams about to look to other best performances, other organizations that have best performances. And in the appendix of that, he suggested going to the San Diego Taxpayers Educational Foundation. We also have a California Association of Bond Oversight Committees. And these places may have best practices on how to recruit or who should be considered in recruiting. And I think it would be good to outreach to those also to get some information on how to recruit. Is that possible, Mr. Freeze?
Yes, that's possible.
Thank you.
Thank
That's all
you.
I
Ms.
have.
Thank you, Ms. Humes. Chairperson Anderson, do you have any questions?
Nothing other than another group to consider, and I know that's how I found out about it several years ago, was the neighborhood consuls. The city of Richmond has a consul of neighborhood consuls, and that's just another avenue of getting the word out. I'll work with Lewis, see what we can come up with in terms of contacts there, and other cities are like that as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's a great suggestion. Okay, we're gonna now move to comments. And why don't we start with Clerk Smith-Foltz? Go ahead.
President Gonzalez-Hoy, you want me to wait for the timer? It's 1 minute, correct? Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. For me, I believe it's absolutely imperative that we do as much outreach as possible. I think that we need to really employ with our communications director and make sure that we're asking our trustees, trustee or Smith, what are the communication outlets in your area? What do you know of? And then we're going to try to implement those. I think that the budget ambassadors is a great place to recruit people for the CBOC. They want to learn and talk about budget and money, and this is part of it, finance. They are very interested in finance. I think making sure that we are all on all social media outlets as a district is a way that we can really push this. If we are looking for PTA and PTO members, then we need to be advertising to PTAs and PTOs. When we, each of our areas have those PTAs and PTOs, we need to be sure that we are speaking about the CBOC. Same thing for SSC, same thing on Parent Square. And I do like the Fairmead Council and the Richmond Neighborhood Council. Those are also ways to reaching out. I am complete.
Thank you. Trustee Reckler, do you have comments?
I do, thank you. So the first one is that I do have some suggestions for recruiting, which I'll just send in separately. But having tried to boost membership in this committee for many years, it's very difficult. It's very difficult. So this really has to be a hand process because you want to find people, you want to train them, you want them to hang around. So my recommendation is mentoring and getting past members who, set up a mentoring group or just so that they're tied, because you step into those meetings and if you don't have a background, you're just going to be completely lost. So the prep, the training, what to expect, mentoring group, forming relationships, I think would reap some results. And then once again, separately, I'll just send in some ideas on how to get some people.
Thank you. Trustee Phillips, do you have comments? Would you mind passing that? Thank you.
Thank you. It has been difficult to recruit members for this committee for as long as I've been around. So this is not new. But it's also been difficult to keep people on the committee. So it's both. With some of the changes that have been passed tonight, I see some older or former members coming back. But I think it would be wise for the board to consider saying that the minimum number of folks on the CBOC is 7. And so making it a range from 7 to 11, because we're not gonna get 11 to stay. We never do. But if we set our floor at 7, we'll always be okay, or should be anyway. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Christian, do you have comments?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to echo the same words, recruitment, that we look out amongst all, because you're looking at all of our cities. I'm sure you got somebody. So we just got to do it, do it right and just make it happen.
Thank you. Chairperson Anderson, do you have any comments? Last minute comments? Ms. Humes, do you have any comments?
Yes, Mr. Freeze had mentioned about new committee member, Ma, that he could ask her about the PTA. I know she has children. I believe they're in the school system, or they will be. Another thing is I sat in on her interview because Chairman Anderson wasn't available. And in her resume, she mentioned several years of experience in banking and finance. Perhaps she belongs to a business group. You might check with her on that too. My second comment is Mr. Phillips was correct in saying it's hard to keep people on the committee. I think one of the problems is we don't have any training. And as Trustee Reckler said, that you go in there, it took me 2 years to know what was going on. Now, I did not have a background in finance. I did not have a background in construction by an interest. And the committee members were very gracious in helping me, but I think you should set up an ad hoc committee between the CBOC and the board and set up a training program for these new members. Look how much training you guys did when you started as board members. You had a lot of training. And I think it would be better for the school district as well as for the committee to have something like that. It was also mentioned in the grand jury investigation. Okay, thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Humes. For my comments, I mean, I echo a lot of things that were just said. I do agree with neighborhood councils. I think that's a great suggestion. I think that actually emailing our city officials, I know there's a weird line about them recommending someone, but they all have newsletters. Just recently we got some, right? And maybe they can ask their constituents to volunteer, right? Because our cities do have a lot of volunteers. So I think that reaching out to our cities would be a great partnership. And then I do think that maybe we got to take on this question about 7 to 11 members in the bylaws committee. And then the no training piece, that bothers me a little bit. I do think that part of why people leave, we have to foster them, right? We got to foster our members. So that's one of the things that I would love for us to have a conversation around is how can we continue to support and develop our members in the committee so they'll stay, right? And they don't leave just because of lack of understanding or lack of, they're lost, right? I remember being lost in the CBOC meetings. It's one of the reasons why I stopped going. So I definitely can relate to that. But thank you. They really do appreciate it. Okay. So now we are actually at 7:55 and we're now moving to comments on the board. It seems like we just made comments though. So I don't know if it's necessary, but I'll put it onto the floor. Board, is there anyone that has comments? And then we can do 1 minute for whoever has a comment, if so. It's okay. You don't have to feel like you don't have to have a comment. Okay. Clerk Smith Falls, Trustee Reckler. I think that's it, right? Okay. Go ahead. 1 minute, please.
I just want to publicly say that I actually really, really like the idea of mentorship. I think that mentorship is a great idea that should be looked at putting into part of our policy, their policy, everybody's policy, because the transition is huge, and having just the time to have a mentor there, someone you can call and ask about, okay, what does it mean? How do I do it? And an independent mentor, I think would be really excellent. And we always need an exit survey. Why are people leaving? If we don't ask the question, we cannot solve the problem. So if we have a CBOC member that is leaving before their term is up, we need to ask why. If we have a CBOC member who is terming out, we need to ask for feedback. What did you think? What do we need to change? What do we need to do? So we have to not only ask, but then turn around and implement. So thank you so very much for this joint meeting. I hope this continues, and I'm looking forward to the next one. I'm complete.
Thank you, Clerk Smith Falls. Trustee Reckler.
Once again, I just want to thank everybody for tonight. I want to thank the CBOC past and present members, future members. Hopefully, if you're out there watching us, come on, it'll be fun, I promise. And that this is really a new start. There are some things to clean up before we start new, but I really hope that this is turning over a new leaf for better oversight for everyone. I'm glad I was finally able to get all this off my chest. So I'm going to send it all in. You could do with it what you want, but I'm glad I got to talk about it. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Okay, so this was our last item. I want to thank everyone for being here. We are going to have another joint meeting in the fall. So we are going to have the second. We're figuring out scheduling it. So we're going to do it eventually. Our next scheduled board meeting is next Wednesday, the 25th, here at Dijon at 6:30. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. We are adjourned at 7:58 p.m. Thank you.